So the collaboration with Final Fantasy VIII is continuing on here this week with our third and final unit, which is none other than the best shooter in the garden, Irvine Kineas. Not a lot of hype so far for this guy as far as I can tell, with Squall and Renoa really stealing most of the thunder there and most of the attention. Great design here though on the artwork as always, but does his kit actually back it up and make him worth using out there on the battlefield? Well, let's dive in and let's find out. So Irvine is going to be joining War of the Visions as a 90 cost dark unit. He'll be repping the gun group and he's going to be wearing hats and cloth. Taking a look at his TMR, this one is going to be his coat. It's going to provide 30 missile attack to your allies while also dropping your own hate by 6. Now that we're here in the Elia meta, the Select 3 really doesn't care about hate at all, so even that part of it I think has been a bit devalued here. Not a great TMR in my opinion, I'm not a fan of it whatsoever. It is an armor piece as well, and no agility on it, which I think is probably the final death knell here for this piece. So really not much going for it, any angle that you look at it. Moving on to the stats, relatively average here across the board for Irvine. His HP, amongst the broad spectrum of the game, really not special whatsoever, but when you do compare it directly to other gunner units, it is definitely on the higher end, definitely one of the higher totals for that class of units, just passing 4,000 HP there innately. His only real highlight stat here though is going to be that dexterity, which even if we look at that, it is not within the top 10 of the game, but definitely is a solid overall value, just crossing that 300 plateau there in his innate value. And that dexterity will definitely help out his accuracy just a little bit, but more importantly, it's really going to amp up his crit potential, which in a final build, we're going to see Irvine is going to have one of the better values out there amongst units currently. It's kind of a similar story when we do consider his agility value there as well, where he's very much middle of the pack, even a little bit below average when you look at his innate value of 63. He does have access to an agility passive, and that is actually that third blue line, which I have added into the graph here. And if you are considering that passive that he has equipped, he will be coming in at 69 agility. It's not a bad value by any means, but really it is just kind of meeting that UR average when passives are considered. So overall here, nothing really all that special in terms of statistics, but really nothing all that bad here either. Now defensively, Irvine is going to be coming in with 0 defense and 0 spirits. Not really all that uncommon here for a gunner class. For resistances though, I'd say he is above average there in terms of that weapon group. He's going to have 15 to both slash and strike, 10% to missile, and 0% against magic. He does have one weakness here, and it is going to be that common pierce damage type, but it is coming in at a whopping minus 15 value, which he's certainly going to be hurting when he comes across those pierce units. Decent ailment resistances, I would say here. He's going to have 50% against confusion and charm, and then 10% to frostbites. A couple of those in terms of manual play are much sought after, especially that charm and frostbite. For his mastery ability, he's going to be getting 10% attack here and then 15% reduced AP consumption. Always a nice quality of life to have that enhanced AP management. If you do take him up to level 140, he's going to be picking up 15% missile res penetration as well as 15 area resistance, and then also an upgrade to his Job 25 ability that we'll look at here in a few moments. For passives, you're definitely going to want that first one here on at all times. It's his major source of defense penetration, and it does come packaged along with that 12% agility as well as a +1 to his range. Overall, a really nice passive. Now I think in most circumstances, I would probably pair that with this second option here, which is a 50% one-hit all damage barrier that he'll have innately going into battle, and it is paired with a bit of an attack bonus there as well. Now you could also opt for an additional range there. He does have a second one, which will get up to 2 total range. However, to do that, you really are sacrificing one of his main sources of survivability, which is that barrier. Could be good for some situations though, especially for manual play. Now traditionally, most gunners in the past have had access to something like Concentrate, which gives them a +2 to their range in one passive, and then even sometimes a second range passive, getting them up to a total of +3 range. Now sadly, that really is not the case here for Irvine, where in many builds he's just going to be having that +1 to his range, putting him kind of more firmly in that mid-range zone of the battlefield. And it seems that they have sort of designed him to be in that place and kind of be a bit more brawly of a gunner when you do consider that HP total that he had, as well as some of those resistances. Now in terms of a counter ability, Irvine does have a pretty nice option here. It has a high 50% chance to proc against both slash and strike damage. So I do actually like that quite a bit. May actually save him if he's able to kill the unit trying to attack him, before they can land the hit. The problem is that it will be susceptible to line of sight here, meaning that it can actually hit your teammates if they happen to be in that line of fire. So definitely something to keep in mind in terms of equipping that or potentially not even using it at all. All right, moving on here into the main kit next, and we're going to start with his buffs. His self buff is going to provide him a 15% area resistance, as well as a +1 to his range. In terms of effects here, they're fine enough, but I will say it is pretty basic, just having these two effects here in, post 3rd anniversary era, where many of the buffs coming in have had much more kind of coming in terms of the components. More area resist here is certainly nice. That would put him up to 30% before you consider any vision cards or other equipment. So I really think it would have been nice to maybe get 15 to each of those, maybe 15 unit and area resist here in this buff. Kind of a missed opportunity, I think, here for maybe a more Brawly style of gunner. Now, the second buff here is called Sniper on Standby. This one is going to be bringing 40% attack as well as 25% agility to your allies. That buff, it's pretty good. Two definitely useful effects there. He does have actually a very similar buff to this within his Hunter sub-job, so maybe it would have been nice to see something just a little bit different here. The nice part of this, though, is that it does add a follow-up attack to your allies for 3 turns, which is a mechanic that we did see debut with Bart's here a couple of months ago. With Irvine here, they do give him a little bit more leeway in terms of how far he can be away from his allies, where that will trigger, his being up to a 4 range and 1 range height. And I do think it's specifically this ability where they have kind of tried with their design to make Irvine a bit more of a Brawly mid-range style gunner, where if he was actually too far away in range from his teammates, they may not be able to actually trigger this and actually get any benefit from it. On to the main abilities here next. His low AP attack is going to be a Select 2, which I don't actually believe we've seen yet in terms of these lower AP abilities. It does have a base range of 5 and a range height of 1. Now, Irvine can get up to a max increase of 3 range on his attacks if you do consider both passives and his range up buff, meaning that his range is going to max out at a total of 8. However, in most builds, I do think that his max potential will probably just be 7, if you are taking that barrier or some other passive. No effects here on this one other than the Select 2, but it is also a 2-hit chaining attack, which will be kind of a theme here for this unit. So maybe actually could be pretty nice if he's finishing off one unit with his attack and is able to actually build up a chain there on another unit at the same time. Now, as you can see by this arrow icon here, this is also a straight line attack, meaning that it does require direct line of sight of your opponent. If teammates are obstacles in the way, he's going to need to move to get around them or may not be able to cast it at all. And in fact, actually all of the attacks here in the main kit do suffer from that limitation. Now, attack number 2 is going to be a base range of 5 with a range height of 2. It's going to be coming in with a large 200% modifier. Prior to the damage, this one will dispel both Protect and Shell, which is super nice utility to actually get rid of both of those. It will also restore 20 CT back to Irvine as well. Once again, this is going to be a 2-hit attack. Very nice skill here, I'd say overall. Nice utility. Always nice to get that CT bonus there as well. And that CT in particular has definitely been one of the more modern power creep angles for the game. We've been seeing more and more of these kind of attacks, kind of amplifying your chance to double turn your opponents in battle, especially if you are carrying that haste status there on top of it. Now, attack number 3 here is going to be Canister Shot. This one is his first area of effect ability. It does have a base range of 5 on the cross AoE, and it's got a medium 165% modifier. Just a single effect here on the attack, and it is a 30% missile imperil there prior to the damage. Really nice to have that imperil there on the cross AoE as well, and at only a 25 AP cost. So this is a really nice skill that's going to help not only his own damage, but certainly any other missile units that you are bringing along with him. Now, his 4th skill here is again going to be that base range of 5 with a range height of 1. It's got a medium 165 modifier. Notice the lack of a dead zone here on this skill, and it is his first skill here in the kit that does have that. And that is going to mean that this one is a piercing style missile attack, where you are actually able to line up and hit multiple units if they are in a direct path. And this does have that advantage that if you are able to hit multiple units, it's still going to be just checked against their unit resistance. And on that note, this skill is also going to be another imperil here for Irvine. Prior to the damage, this is providing a 20% unit resistance imperil, so that scenario I was just talking about, it is going to help the damage of this particular skill here as well. So definitely another nice skill here for Irvine, another thing that can then help his damage potential, especially with that follow-up attack, which, you know, if you are able to drop their unit resistance into the negatives, you're definitely going to be able to see big damage on that. It is actually another part of his survivability here with that damage absorption, where, you know, maybe you could actually take advantage of some healing power on this unit as well. Personally, I think I would have liked to see maybe a 50% absorb on this one that, you know, really would have been able to top him off there in battle. The 30% absorptions really, unless you're doing big damage, generally haven't been enough to really get a full heal out of it. Now, last up is going to be the Limit Burst, and this one is Hyper Shot. This one's going to be a straight line AoE at a base range of 5, again with that range height of 1. Just a single effect coming in on this one, pre-damage, and that is going to increase his defense pen there by 30 for 3 turns. So between the passive ability and this buff, that is going to put him at a 70% defense penetration before you really consider any gear or vision cards or etc. So that certainly is pretty good for his damage potential. And certainly the follow-up attack, you know, that is another thing that can increase that damage potential of those, having very high defense penetration. So that certainly is pretty decent. I think personally I would have liked to have seen this defense penetration added into that self buff that he has, and maybe some other more unique effect here on the Limit Burst. Because certainly, you know, with that straight line pattern here on this attack, it is a bit more limiting in how you can use it and when you can use it, especially at just a range height of 1. This attack is a chaining attack though. It is a 3-hitter, so it does give him access to some chaining potential even beyond the 2 hitters that we were talking about there in the main kit. Irvine's sub-job of Hunter does give him access to a 3-hit missile attack as well, so it does line him up with 4 uses of 3-hit attacks. Makes him a very, very stellar guild grade unit in my view. So there is a new vision card that has been released alongside Irvine this week. This one's called Natural Loner. Do love the artwork here, kind of showing this kind of softer moment here with the butterfly. Believe it or not though, this is going to be our first weapon card that does affect both missile jobs of bow users and gun users. I do hope that this is going to be the start of a trend moving forward. You know, thus far with the job VC system, I do think that has been one of the limitations for it in terms of those ranged classes, and sort of fragmenting them and putting them into separate buckets. Now, besides guns and bows, this one is also going to be affecting daggers and spear jobs here as well. And this one is sort of an all-out offense card here. You're going to have acquired AP, you're going to have attack up, and crit rate there as the party effects. It does come with a pretty nice bestowed ability here on top of that, with the 10% unit resist and 10% missile res penetration. So I do think this is a pretty big upgrade over, say, the Astrologer's card, you know, in terms of a rainbow missile party. It is going to have the similar party effects there of the acquired AP and attack up. Is it a must-have card though? I'm not sure. You know, maybe if you're a diehard missile player, or maybe you are trying to work in some of those Pierce jobs, it certainly, you know, could have some nice synergy there. Or maybe you're just all in for Irvine, and I would say definitely grab it there. It does have some limited bestowed effects for him specifically. So overall, pretty decent offensive card here, but certainly nothing mind-blowing or mandatory. Taking a look now at Irvine's weapon group, which is the gun class, and it has quietly sort of built up a decent collection of cards here so far, especially once we do get that Melnia card, which unfortunately for us here in Global has been delayed, and we don't know exactly when it will come, but at this point it does looking like November or later. And I do think that card really is key in terms of opening up job teams, not only for the gun class, but also for the knight class and maybe even the mace class there as well. And the reason for that is it does bring that agility and unit resist combination, making it definitely one of the better job cards that have been released so far. Now, in terms of partners that you could pair him with, I really do think that Melnia is the best option. I do think that Irvine has been designed specifically with her in mind, and they do complement each other pretty well. Unfortunately though, Melania, much like her vision card, is also delayed. Again, it is looking like November or later for her. Now, another option I know that a lot of people immediately kind of thought of was Prompto, you know, kind of being a gun class within his same elements. Personally, I just never thought that he has been all that great of a unit since his day one release. We still don't have his 140 upgrade yet from the Pixel remaster reissue, and again, we don't know when that is coming. So considering that, there really isn't all that much much, to put together here, at least on day one for Irvine for multi-element rainbow teams, other than maybe trying him out with some other gunners like an Elia, perhaps, or maybe even a Summer Jaden. And at this point, while those units are certainly very solid, they're definitely not top of the meta picks right now. So your results actually may be mixed with that party. All right, guys, so on to the mock builds here next. And I'm going to be just doing a single build today. I'm not going to be doing a mono element build. I really don't think that Irvine fits well into the dark mono setup at all right now. The cards aren't optimal. The teams aren't optimal, in terms of putting him with Prompto. I mean, I guess you could put him, with Sephiroth, but I do think there are better options out there, for that team. And I think the reason for that is Irvine, I think like many other units released as of late, has definitely been designed with the weapon VC system and synergy in mind. And like we were alluding to there in the job overview, I don't think that we're really set up to even see his full potential as he saw on his JP release, because simply, we are missing Melnia at this point. So with that in mind, I am going to be pairing Irvine here with Melnia, as I mentioned, but also with Raph, who, not only do they have good elemental synergy together, but, the gunner and mace jobs do synergize very, very well from a job card perspective. Now, aside from that, I will be leaning in a bit on that design note of Irvine sort of being a bit more of a tankier gunner, and we're going to be focusing in on some defenses like unit resistance and strike resistance. So for equipment here in the build, I will be using the new gun weapon that is coming in alongside Irvine. To be honest, it's really not my favorite one out there, but out of all the options that he has access to, in terms of the passives, it probably is the best one of the bunch. It does have a unique attribute on there that it will break the attack of your opponent on a crit, and that does stack with other attack breaks out there, so that's certainly pretty unique and pretty nice. Now, along with that weapon, I'm going to be using the Survival Vest +6 there for the unit resistance. If you were looking for more of an offensive focus, you certainly could swap in the Diamond Coat or maybe even the Genji Glove there. In the TMR slot, I'm going to be using another option that we have to look forward to in the future, and that is going to be Bronwell's TMR. I think that it has a really nice combination of both self-haste and a reduce in his AP consumption by 25%. So I think that stacked with Irvine's own 15% reduction will have his AP management in a really good spot. Until that comes in, of course, you could use Bradley's TMR or any haste TMR really, or if you really needed that AP, Bell's or some other AP type TMR could be good as well. Now for an Esper, I'm going to be going with Behemoth, which I think is a sneaky good choice for him. He actually has 15% strike resist on his board, so that's going to be good in that Elia matchup. And you are actually able to pair that with a bunch of attack nodes as well as dark attacks, so it's a really solid offensive option here for him as well. Now for the vision card setup, I'm actually not going to be using that natural loner card here in the main slots. With gunners generally having an average or below average, base attack value, I do like the overall bonus from the missile modifier on this Pursuer card here just a little bit more. This card does bring the benefit of having all 3 primary vision cards impacting all 3 of my units, as Raph is also included on that Pursuer card as well. It does have some magic resistance in there, which could actually be pretty good here with Saul and some other magic that will be infused into the meta very soon. The other reason why I do like Irvine's card in the sub-slot there is that it does carry a hefty amount of acquired AP, which actually doesn't suffer all that much from being placed there in your secondary slot. Now pairing with that, I am going to be using that Queen Macherie card there on Raph for the area resist and dexterity, and then the much anticipated Melnia card there on Melnia herself for that unit resist, agility, and reaction block. So I think at least in terms of card synergy here, it is one of the better multi-job teams that I have seen in recent memory. I really, really like this combination. Now moving down into the Trust Stones, I do have my standard anti-Elia setup here on the left side with some strike and lightning resistance. On my right side for the offensive stones, acquired AP and dex I think are very, very important for him. Really going to boost up his crit rate, and that dex actually does factor into his damage as well. Aside from that, I'm going to be just filling out some passives here, especially building up those penetration values. As I mentioned earlier, if you really were looking to lean into that absorb attack, healing power could be a good one to use here as well. I think outside of an evade matchup, HP and agility stones are usually my go-to sets. Of course, if you were looking to build up accuracy, luck and axe sets are definitely the way to go. Now, as we mentioned there in the stats overview, Irvine really isn't a speed demon in terms of his agility, so I do think an agility set is pretty important for him, especially if you are using a TMR which doesn't have any agility base stats. So we'll take a quick look at the statistics here for the builds. No HP card is in the party here, so you can see we're not even breaking that 9k HP plateau, which is really, really low for the modern state of the game. Very, very nice dex and crit values that we've been able to build up here at over 220%. He'll be very, very reliable in terms of critting his opponents. With the defensive focus that we did have here in the build, I would say the resistances are pretty respectable. 42% unit resist, 35 area resist. He's going to get up to 50 there with his self buff. And then we are going to have 37 strike resistance here in the build on top of it. I think assuming that you do have that barrier on there in battle, he maybe could eke out 2 hits from Elias. So if you are able to get that, I think that is pretty solid as far as gunners go. The penetration values here with the missile res and defense pen, certainly not top of the line, but they're not too shabby either. I think that his offensive potential is going to be pretty good, especially when that follow-up attack is considered. At any event, if you are interested in taking a closer look here at the builds, as always, I'll go ahead and put a link to it in the description below. So what is my verdict today on Irvine? Starting with the positives, Irvine has above average bulkiness for a gunner. When comparing him against other units within his cohort, his HP and resistances are both very solid. Of course, he does have that one-hit all-damage barrier within his passives that he can equip as well. Another very nice feature of this unit is that buffable ally follow-up that he has. That was a mechanic that we first saw introduced with Bart. And yes, they do actually stack together and can work together pretty well. So that follow-up, I think, definitely does enhance his damage potential, you know, when you do factor that in. And definitely makes him a good unit that you can pair with other units that may be bringing large area effect damage, and you can maximize, you know, the output on that follow-up. Now, on top of that, he does bring a couple of pretty nice imperils to the team in terms of that missile and unit resistance. Again, not only going to enhance his own damage, but also that of any other missile units that you do bring along with him. And finally, Irvine really is set up to be a very nice guild grade chainer, bringing 4 total uses of 3-hit abilities, as well as those debuffs there that we just mentioned. Now, on the more negative side, I'm really not a huge fan of this mid-range attack design that we've kind of alluded to here within the review. And what I mean by that is that his total range is generally going to be 1 to 2 less tile reach than we've seen with other gunners here in the past. And I do believe they have intentionally made this design choice in order to try and maximize that follow-up attack ability that he has and not have him too far out of reach for either your front or back line to take advantage of it. And to be clear, I don't dislike that as a concept. I think that it's a very good idea. The problem is that Gumi has continually failed on the idea and concept of a tanky gunner. And I believe that they have failed Irvine in that regard as well, as I don't think they really went far enough in the tankiness direction, in my opinion, for, you know, me to really feel comfortable with, you know, where he's going to be lined up on the battlefield, especially with that barrier passive just being a single hit or single charge. Now, unfortunately, Irvine does also carry on the gunner tradition of really having problems when it comes to line of sight and range heights on his attacks as well, where you may find him continually maneuvering and moving around the battlefield in order to line up that perfect shot, and perhaps bringing him into further danger in battle in doing so. Now, my last point here is definitely more of a temporary issue, but I do believe that Irvine may be missing out on some prime opportunity to be used in the meta, due to the delay of Melnia, who serves as Irvine's best partner in my opinion, and whom is a unit I think that Irvine was designed specifically to work alongside. And not only that, the delay of her vision card, which is the best gunner card we've seen issued in the game to date. At the end of the day, Irvine is a fine enough unit, just really not exceptional in any one way, other than maybe that PvE chaining angle, or perhaps maybe on the manual PvP side. Outside of that, I really don't see this unit making any significant dent in the auto PvP meta, and I do believe that Gumi really has some work to do on core missile abilities and mechanics in War of the Visions before any missile unit will be able to do so in general. As in my opinion, the introduction of the Select 3 unit attack that we've seen on Elia and probably on more units in the future, attacks that can so easily decimate and kill your back line, has really muted any real reason or competitive advantage to use missile tactics in the first place. So there it is, guys. Those are my thoughts and opinions today on Irvine. I have to say that following in the footsteps of Final Fantasy V, overall from top to bottom, this collaboration was a bit of a letdown as well. And personally, I do believe that Gumi has clearly gone into this place with these last two collaborations specifically, where they're just making these units in a place where they're good enough to play, but really not having any long-lasting appeal or impact on the meta. Now, why exactly would they do that? Well, at this point, I think that they know that we're going to pull for those favorite units either way. And personally, I believe they've been doing that to make those regular pool units even more enticing to pull, as they're given, more timely enhancements and more busted abilities than we've been seeing ever before. So that we're not simply hoarding for that next collaboration, which, actually maybe does have some positive aspects to it. Maybe it's easier not to FOMO over these huge collab units where, maybe it doesn't feel quite as bad that, you missed out on Sephiroth because you weren't playing when his banner was issued. But at the same time, I think it's definitely a letdown to folks like myself who were looking for more of a meta impact from a favorite mainline game like Final Fantasy VIII. So let me know what you guys think about all that in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about Irvine as well. While you're down there, hit that like button for me. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like what I'm doing here on the channel, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And that's really all that I have to say for today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.